All right, let's call this meeting to order for the Urbana City Council.
It's not here.
And would the clerk please call the roll?
Alderpersons Barnes. Here. Bowersox.
Here.
Chenoweth. Lewis. Roberts.
Here.
Smythe.
Here.
Stevenson. Mayor Pressing.
Here. And we'll start this meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Would you please stand? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the previous meeting?
I make a motion to approve the minutes of the August 15th meeting of the City Council.
And I second that motion.
Okay, motion by Mr. Roberts, seconded by Ms. Barnes. Any discussion?
And can that motion include the special meeting minutes that were presented to us as a separate page?
Yes, they could include the special
Okay.
special meeting minutes.
We got two of them then.
I concur.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Are there any additions to the agenda? Okay, hearing none. Petitions and communications, Burnell Dixon. Okay, John Lee Johnson.
I don't want to change protocol. I did give it 6:30.
Okay, I don't have the time listed on here, sir. Just state your name and your address, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. John L. Johnson, 44 East Main, Champaign. I have just a few comments I would like to make regarding the last item on the, next to the last item on the agenda, or the last item, which is the IDOT report on traffic stops. I was made aware about 15 minutes ago that there's been an updated report prepared by the Urbana Police Department, which I have not seen a copy of, but I think it has improved upon the original report, which I did see. The comments I would like to make are brief. There are only 4, and they are as following. The departments and City Council need to establish a benchmark, a number from which the community can determine if excess stops occur in future reports. I believe this number should be taken from the 2000 census for all persons 15 or older to 80 years of age, or whomever would be included in the driving population in Urbana. In addition, we need to know if any and what impacts the Twin Cities, the university, present to our driving public here in Urbana. By benchmarking, the department, our council, will set the number from which the public might judge the data provided by the department regarding the numbers of the stops. 2, the department needs to provide an explanation for numbers or actions which its total stop numbers are excessive by race, gender, location, or actions taken doing or resulting from the stops in comparison to the racial makeup of the subgroup. 3, the legislature did not require data on calls for services nor data on incidents of crimes in jurisdiction related to the profiling legislation. When this information is provided, the department must provide an explanation to the correlation of the information to the specific data of stops as it relates to the intent of the legislature regarding profiles. You skew the data when you compound it with information which is not required or explained in a manner consistent with the statutes. Were stops targeted to specific groups as defined by crime data for that area as an example? The final point that I think is important, the point of the exercise are for the police department to examine their actions internally and publicly. There should always be a department rationale for all actions taken or an internal explanation, and for those actions which no rationale can be offered, the department should state publicly the action to be taken. Some of this, I think, has been accomplished in the updated report provided by the department. but some of it has not. Briefly, when I looked at the report, the department still provides calls for services within patrol areas. You don't know what that means. The legislature did not require departments to do that. There's normally not racial profiling. If I call the police and say that someone is trying to break in my house, or someone makes a complaint about crime in an area. So I didn't know, and I still don't know why that information is there, unless the police department is alleging that this data has some implications to profiling in a specific area, and you can correlate that issue with calls for services. That was never made clear, or it could have been made clear in the updated report, which I have not seen. There were a series of recommendations, which I briefly saw, but I didn't get an opportunity to examine them close enough to see if they complied with my concerns. This is the first report, so it's a stepping point. All of the answers will not be answered now. I think we're moving in the right direction. I think it's important that the council look at the report, understand what the legislature is asking you to do, that is to provide a manner by which subgroups can determine whether or not if actions taken by your police department relating patrol stops complies with the state constitution and the federal constitution, and for the local law enforcement to examine their actions and to weed out from their actions any activities which result in a violation of the public's civil rights.
Are there any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, Joe Whalen.
Thank you, Your Honor. Council and Mayor, it's a privilege to be here without arguing or anticipating arguing. I brought a...
We're having problems here in the back.
Would you like to speak into the microphone a little bit better?
Yes.
Okay, closer.
Can you hear better now?
Yes, sir.
I have an award I'd like to present to the fire department for two reasons. One, at one time, one night, they saved my life. I had a hemorrhage in my head, and they put it all together and kept me alive. Second reason is for their service to the city, their fine service, and their unselfish service. So I would like to, at this time, present this to Chief Munt, Mayor.
Okay.
Thank you.
On behalf of my name and all members of Urbana Fire, we thank you very much. We appreciate the service you've done for our city also. So thank you very much.
Mayor, I won't take any more of your time, except that you advised me to make I'd like to contribute to Urbana's effort to help the people down in Alabama, Mississippi, and New Orleans, where I just returned from before the hurricane. But I'd like to present a check for $100 to join you in your efforts.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
I think you've made a check to the American Red Cross, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Burnell Dixon.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Honorable Council members. My name is Burnell Dixon. I live on Crystal Lake Drive in Urbana. I'm a resident of Urbana. I've been so for several years. And I do have a couple concerns about the police profiling report. Now, the last report that was given, I was very distraught over, okay? The report didn't give enough information. I thought it was vague. I thought it was nebulous. And when I compared it with the City of Champagne's report, I was distraught. It didn't seem to have a professional information and professional report. I listened to information indicating that there were enough officers, or they didn't have the staff that Champagne had, but I'm sorry, I disagree with that, okay? And I was glad to see my council ask for more information. Now, what I'm asking today is we continue that dialogue, that we continue to ask for more information, because I don't think the information, and I haven't seen all of it, okay, and I'm going to investigate this a little bit further, but I think we need to investigate this a little bit further, because for one of the comments I heard at the last council meeting regarding profiling, that the individual indicated that we were in the middle of the pack for Central Illinois. And to me, that's simply not good enough. We need to lead the pack. Okay? And I respectfully request my honorable council members to make us leaders, not followers. Thank you very much.
Any questions? Ms. Chenoweth?
Mr. Dixon, were you made aware of the police department's first Thursday meeting that they had in the month of August? This is a meeting with the police department, open forum to discuss.
When I was at the Champaign City Police Office meeting last week, okay, I believe it.
But you weren't aware of the...
No, ma'am.
Okay.
No
I think
information.
Our police
And I
department
think
needs to make sure that that's...
Yes, ma'am. If we could do a little bit more to get information out to citizens, because I would have been there. Okay, and you know I would have been there. So I thank you very much.
Okay.
Well, they will be having meetings in the future, so I think we'll get a little bit more publicity out.
I would appreciate that. Thank you, Ms. Mayor.
Any other questions? Okay, the next person is Gabe. Would you please state your name and address?
Gabe, 2409 North High Cross. And I guess I'm here today I guess the city council members have some questions for me as regards 123 West Main, whatever it is we're supposed to do downtown. But before I go into that, I would like to say the people who, they say some people are moving to Champaign from the hurricane thing. You know, if they have no place to live, I think I can provide free accommodation for different two-bedroom apartments for as much as 2 or 3 months. So if anybody knows that, they can contact my office, 344-0700. The second thing is, I did not intend to talk on this before, but it looks like we're beaten to death this profiling issue. You know, and look, you know, the most important thing is not who pulls who over, but you know, I went to the Champaign meeting, and my question was, what is the percentage of crime committed by black people in the city? We should start from there, you know. And of course, we've succeeded in scaring white people to death. You guys are scared to be called racist, so you can't ask the tough questions. And the policeman in Champaign said, well, after looking through different things, they knew it by heart, but they were afraid to say it. 64%. Well, if 64% of all the crime is committed by a certain ethnic group, and the ethnic group lives in the same neighborhood, the chances are, if somebody calls and says, look, somebody just robbed a rib joint or something, and they say, what's the description? And you say, black male, so and so. The chances are, when the police are looking for the guy, they are going to stop black males. They're not going to stop a white guy. It's not the white guy that's robbed the place, you know. And fortunately, we do have a black police chief, you know. He knows what racism is. He grew up in the South. So, well, that's besides the point. What I actually came to talk about is I've been negotiating with the city for probably a year and a half now about what they intended to do with 123 West Main, the walkway going into the building that I own. And we started by the city saying, well, I had to take the walkway down. And then I said, well, you know, the walkway does not belong to me. And the city said, neither does it belong to them. And, you know, so we went back and forth, and it was agreed that they would take, they will repair that and probably did the property to me. Unbeknownst to me, though, I did not know that they had no authority to negotiate on behalf of the council. So I was sort of surprised when they're the experts, you have the engineers and all the people that you pay, the staff members. After we had gone this rigmarole for a year and a half, we had the contract, and I hurriedly signed it so that, they can start the work, and I am out 50 grand already by taking down my part of the deal and putting on a new roof, et cetera. And then I was, to my surprise, called, and they said, well, no, not so fast. The city needs more information. I said, I thought we had already done that. You guys have been talking to me for a year and a half. It means the city did not know about that? Well, I'm a businessman, and usually we don't want to talk to people who have no authority. And if the staff members have no authority, then there's no point talking to them. It's my intention to at least remodel the eatery down there and probably get a liquor license, And, of course, now it's sort of, I'm very tentative as to taking any step because I'm not sure who has authority to talk for the city. So, if anybody has questions. Yeah.
Ms. Chenoweth.
Yeah, I'm extremely pleased to see that you're renovating the downtown building that you own, and I've seen the work that you've already started to do in terms of tearing down the scaffolding and things like that. Since it wasn't provided to us in our information this evening, what kind of grant loan incentive are you receiving for the work that you're doing at that location?
Well, I've not received anything yet, I have, the budget for me with everything I want to do with the facade and all of that I've talked to the city about, trying to have a brick facade that matches the downtown area. My budget's about $240,000, and I talked to Kathy Lawson, and she said because it's basically considered 3 buildings, I might be able to borrow interest-free loan. I go to the bank, they give me the loan, and the city pays 5.5% of the interest, and I pick up the difference, the market, But to this point, I have not gone further with it. We've not done anything. The money that I've spent is my money so far, so I don't, of course, if the city wants to pay interest, that's fine, I think the city's downtown, and downtown needs to be rehabilitated. That's it.
Absolutely, I agree. Just a few follow-up questions. So you're not taking advantage of the loan program because you have cash on hand. You don't need to take out a loan.
I'm taking the bank. I'm taking a loan from Headland Bank.
Okay.
And they have talked to the city, and the city the city has told them is that they will pay interest of 5.5%, and then I pick up the difference between the 5.5% and the market rate, And they did also tell me that, as time goes on, I don't know how that's determined, I do qualify for a grant, on each building. And, of course, I'm not an American, and we can always say that we're not doing it for the money. We're doing it for everybody else. So I'm doing it for all the people of Urbana, even though I get to keep the rent. The point is, it was my decision to go ahead anyway after talking to your members of staff, and the guarantee of the low interest loan helps.
But you haven't received grant monies at this time?
No.
Okay. The issue, I think, to maybe clarify a little bit, is typically council receives things that where some kind of incentive is tied with a certain agreement to perform certain work. In this case, the question that we brought up last week was that there was no tie there. It was simply, we're going to fix the bridge and it'll belong to you, and there was no connection between those things. And in the materials we received today, in terms of the actual ordinance that we're voting on, it does not tie those things together. That's unusual. Typically, you're correct that if a property owner is going to invest in something, there may be some incentives involved with that. My question to you, just so that's to clarify, that's I think the unique situation. Usually this is smooth sailing for these kinds of programs. The question I have to you is, why is it that we're not sharing the cost of the bridge? It makes sense that if we don't know who owns the bridge, that you would pay for half, we would pay for half, and we'd be done with it.
Well, then who would have paid for the deck? or the scaffolding. I mean,
Exactly.
you have to remember the scaffolding that I've taken down, and I'm out 50 grand already. You know, I mean,
That's your private property, I understand.
okay. Well, you know, the point is, nobody. You know, if somebody were to fall off that bridge, guess who they'll sue? They'll sue the city, not me. You have deeper pockets. You know, so it's more in your interest to fix it. And like I said, when we first started negotiating with Bruce Walden, Bill Gray, and so on and so forth. Look, when they built that bridge, I was still in Africa. You know, I had nothing to do with it. You know, I mean, I bought the building, and they showed it to me that for some reason there was a mistake somewhere. Nobody can determine legally who owns it. So the idea, which makes sense to me, was, well, we'll repair it, and then we'll deed it to you, and then you take over maintenance of that until further notice. Well, when we're negotiating, they actually suggested that maybe we'll take it down. Well, the cost of taking it down is probably close to the cost of repairing it, and I don't think Urbana will take it down. I mean, you guys, you know, care about minorities, the disabled, etc. If you take it down, the disabled can't get up there, and I don't think that's good for Urbana. So, I mean, it's from what I've said, it's downtown. The bridge there, if it falls, I was looking at it today actually before coming, and I see the rust underneath. You know, it will fall someday, and believe me, people go after deeper pockets.
So are you saying that you actually don't want the bridge? It's something that if we want it, we can make it happen, but you don't want the bridge? Because that doesn't make, you have tenants who currently use that bridge to access their property.
Well, yeah, you know, but we can also try to make the law retroactive. You know, I'm not very good at begging for stuff. You know, I mean, you guys don't understand that. You can also make it retroactive and say that, well, we're cutting this bridge off and we're taking it down, even though it costs us the same amount of money to fix it and rebuild it. And then after rebuilding it, you know, then you're going to have to maintain it over the years. You know, when you calculate all of that to just repairing it and then saying, okay, Gabe, from now on, you're responsible for it. You know, that makes sense. If you say, well, because Gabe did not come here and genuflect, we're going to take it down, then, you know, people can read whatever they want into it. You know, I think basically, right now, that place abides by the American with Disabilities Act. If it's taken down, it basically means that, you know, somebody has caused something that was in conformity with some federal law that will happen, and then we'll find out who's responsible. You know, I mean, that's how I say it. I mean, I think the fact that I'm spending my own money is good enough. You know, I'm spending my own money. You know, at least if I get whatever it is, the interest-free money. The interest-free money doesn't mean that I'm not going to pay the principal back. I'm still paying the principal back. And you also have to remember that I moved my office to that building. And believe it or not, I mean, I know that some people think Urbana is heaven. 90% of students that come to the U of I don't know that there's a downtown Urbana. And now, by having my office there, at least 700-800 people come in there every month to pay rent, which makes them see Urbana. When we moved our office and we said we're downtown, all of them, 90% of them went to Champaign because they had never heard of it before. So I'm already performing a service. If you check your parking deck income, I'm sure it's up, you know, because my tenants use it when they come there. Even Crane Alley, you know, I mean, Bruce called me a while ago and said, well, they wanted to have some lights fixed on my building. I said, well, you know, as a good neighbor, you know, like State Farm, I was there, you know. So it's, you know, it's not just part of me. You might think, you might call it arrogance or whatever it is, but I just think that I talk the way I feel. Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Smythe, I think,
No,
is who's next? Brandon?
I think I was.
Brandon.
Mr. Omosagi, congratulations.
Yeah, call me Gabe, please.
Gabe, congratulations. I'm really thrilled about the carport coming down, about the facade renovation, and about all of your investment in downtown. A few questions about the property. I'm wondering what is still vacant upstairs? What are some of the vacant space?
There's nothing vacant upstairs.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the downstairs, the restaurant space is the vacant space.
And we have rehabbed the other 125 West Main, the inside. All we need now is the facade, and of course, when we start, the assumption is that it's probably going to be between 100 and 120,000, but we all know that these things always go over budget. And in fact, what I was actually thinking of, which probably would never have passed council, was to take the entire carport down and build an extension of some of the offices so that I can at least get some money back from my investment. But of course, I didn't want to do that.
Okay, next question. Is there an elevator in the building?
No, because it's grandfathered in.
Okay.
That's why I'm saying that if you take the walkway down, then they're going to be wondering how I'm not concerned about me. I can still walk. The
So
disabled.
when you lease the building, to what effect does the parking deck attachment to the building, this bridge, help you lease out the space, or to what effect do your current tenants need it? And if it wasn't there, your current tenants would have trouble using the space.
They can all walk. They'll come in through the front.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is that they're all basically lawyers, and lawyers tend to have customers that might be disabled. That's all I'm saying.
And my last question is, this isn't a traditional development agreement, and we're doing some things to the property, you're doing some things, we're collaborating to improve this property downtown. Are you amenable to a more standard development agreement where, for example, the city would repair 100% of the bridge costs in return for you doing the facade renovation within 24 months and finding a restaurant tenant in 24 months and tying them together?
Actually, I was negotiating with somebody for the restaurant, and I'm sure, I don't know if Laurel knows about this, but, I talked to Bruce and I got a fax from him, but he couldn't sign and guarantee that we'll get a liquor license. And in signing the lease, I'm trying to have a tenant who will not go under, because, and the liquor license almost guarantees that he will not go under. So I did talk to the mayor's office, and I don't know, maybe a personal assistant or secretary got back to us and said they cannot guarantee that we'll get the license until they go through the normal procedure, maybe to see if I've been to jail before, or whatever it is that they do. So we held off on that. But yeah, in good faith, I dealt with everybody, and it was my intention to try to do the facade. Nobody asked me to do that, so I think it's good enough.
Ms. Barnes?
Well, you partially answered my question. I just want to kind of confirm your vision for this restaurant. Is it kind of a high-end, medium-end, open in the evenings?
We want to just keep it simple and make sure the people, whoever it is, because I'm going to be investing a substantial amount of money. What I tell them is, you bring the plan to us, we look at what we think would be most viable. If it's going to be something like Murphy's Pub, just simple, we understand that probably will be more viable than having somebody extremely nice like Crane Alley. There's no reason to have the same type of restaurant right next to each other. So that's where we stand.
Mr. Smythe?
Gabe, I think you missed the point that several have tried to make, which is in a typical development agreement, there's a place where the owner signs and the city signs and says, we do this, you do that, period, guaranteed, and it's all done within a certain timeline and so on. There isn't one of those agreements in this document. And that's why when this document comes to us, we say, why is this person getting special treatment? The other people who also have received a bridge have taken it with nothing. They have assumed full responsibility for that bridge, no repairs, no nothing. They've taken it. It's theirs now. They're not getting anything and they're not getting anything from the city. It's theirs. They're not making any investment in their building. They've already made hundreds of thousands of dollars of investments in downtown for many, many years. Okay? And they've asked for nothing when taking the bridge. Okay? This bridge has to come down, period. It's going to be removed and replaced. So there's a cost for removal and there's a cost for rebuilding it. Okay, we could remove it and be done with it, and that'll be a city cost, and we'll be finished. And that's a lot cheaper than removing and replacing it. Okay, it can't just be repaired. It's got to be replaced. And so if you want the city to commit $72,000, which is what it's going to cost to remove and replace the bridge, what are the guarantees that you're willing to put in writing? What are you putting down to match our $72,000 investment? And that's what we're asking. What is there in writing? You're saying, oh, my good faith, I'm going to do this. Well, we need it in writing. We need it in writing. Are you willing to do it in writing? Yes or no?
Well, yes, number one.
Yes, you're going to put it in writing.
Well, you don't have to raise your voice.
Well, I don't want to hear a lot of talking. You've been going on and on.
Well,
yes or no?
See, this is the whole
yes
thing.
Yes or no? Are you going to put it in writing?
You're not going to into anything.
No,
okay?
All I want to know is, are you going to put it in?
Listen here. When I've been talking, nobody asked me. When Bruce asked me and said, "Can we attach some lights for Crane Alley to your building?" He did not say, "Well, will you put it in writing that I get this for that?" Okay, so I did it. Okay, when Bruce said and Bill, when we provided all the architectural drawings and everything else, and started spending money to take down the carport and all of that stuff, and doing some work on the inside, and renovating 125 West Main, and putting ads in to get a viable tenant in 121. We didn't ask for anything, So, like I said, I'm not very good at begging. If you want me to beg you, well.
No, we're not asking for you to beg. We're asking for a standard development agreement, like everybody else gets.
Okay, so what you're saying now is that I'm asking for special treatment?
Basically, from our council point of view, and this is for the council point of view, we approve the use of public funds for various things.
Yeah.
What are we approving here? We're giving you special treatment is what it looks like compared to the other owners of property downtown.
What is the special treatment? I'm putting a new facade in.
The other people that have, the other bridge has just been taken over. We didn't give them any money. We haven't done anything for them. And they've invested lots of money over the years to the city of Urbana, in the city of Urbana. So what we're saying, and we make development agreements. The council approves agreements. We approve the expenditure of public money. We get something back for that.
Sure. The president,
so my question for you is can we just put this in writing that you're going to invest $200,000 over the next 24 months in return for the city doing $72,000?
$200,000 on what?
Of doing your facade and so on. Just putting in writing what you're going to be spending money on.
Well, yeah, that's not a problem. But I want to ask you though, the people that you say you've given their bridge to, and they're going to maintain it or whatever it is, do they need repair?
It will need repair.
No, did it need repair right now?
No, it doesn't need repair right now.
Okay, so we're talking different things. There's what we call the time value of money. Okay? If this bridge did not need immediate repair, I don't think we'll be discussing this. It needs immediate.
Exactly. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
So,
and Danielle pointed out earlier, a lot of times we split the cost of something like that. Okay, we do things, we split the costs, we find some development agreement, we spend $50,000 for we'll spend $100,000 on a traffic light, or $1 million on, we're putting we're about to approve a $200,000 demolition, but we're getting that money back. It's part of a development agreement that's got a timeline associated with it and an investment by the people on the other side in return for that. There's a standard development agreement. The Kmart thing that's coming up next on the agenda, right after yours, it's a development agreement. Okay, and it spells out what they are doing in writing with guarantees. That's all we're asking from you.
Sure, no problem.
Okay, then we're done. That's fine. Perfect. All you have to do now is put that in writing with the city, and in 2 weeks from now, we can finalize this.
So I think we should probably move on. Okay. We do have your ordinance, I guess, on the agenda, right?
Right.
But in terms of petitions and communications, I think we should move on.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any old business?
I do have an announcement under
Yes.
communications, if that's all right.
Okay, go ahead.
Just want to let those viewers, as well as those of you in the audience, know that the ASUNA organization, which is the Southeast Urbana Neighborhood Association, is going to be having a meeting September 14th, which is a Wednesday night at 7 p.m., and it's going to be at Yankee Ridge School in the gym. And I believe our chief will be attending, as well as some of the other city staff. So just for those of you viewing, to be aware of that. Thank you.
Any other petitions or communications? Ms. Chenoweth?
Thank you. I just wanted to make the council and the public aware that the domestic partner registry, which we passed, I believe it was May of this, no, it's shortly before this council. It's the last act of the prior council, is now open. We've had at least two dozen couples register. So if folks can go to the website to check out more information about the domestic partner registry.
Okay, thank you. Okay, reports of standing committees, the Committee of the Whole. Who was going to do that? Was that Heather?
It's Charlie.
Charlie.
Okay, from the committee meeting of August 22nd, we have 4 items. Item number 1 is ordinance number 2005-08-125, an ordinance approving and authorizing the execution of an agreement with Gabriel Omo Osagi pedestrian bridge. This was sent to council without recommendation.
Ms. Barnes?
And I would like to move that we approve this with the caveat that it sounds to me like Gabe is open to recording what he's planning to do and the money that he is planning to spend. So it makes sense to approve that contingent upon that documentation of that in this agreement. So I would move that we proceed in that way.
Ms. Chenoweth?
I think in terms of guidance, one of the ways that we could do that, which I agree that's probably the best way to move forward, is to send this to the next council with direction from staff, since we don't actually have language that we would be voting on this evening that include a agreement that would include the recipient's responsibilities, that the staff would draft that for our next council meeting.
Or next committee meeting.
I don't think we can pass it at
Just
committee
council.
meeting. We could just
Okay.
send it straight to council.
Okay. So that would be, what, I guess 2 weeks from tonight? Okay.
So you're amending your motion?
I would amend my motion.
Is there a second to the amended
Second.
motion? Any discussion? Mr. Roberts?
Well, I was very interested, and I was very pleased that Gabe came to this council meeting to discuss his plans, or at least attempt to begin to discuss his plans, and his interests in having the pedestrian bridge resolved in some way that it might be either removed or repaired. And I felt that it didn't make complete sense for the city to replace the bridge if it didn't serve a specific purpose, and perhaps Mr. Omasaki has indicated that there are certain aspects of the bridge which facilitate getting to the second floor for the disabled, since this building doesn't have an elevator. I had big doubts about how it might tie in, or if it tied in at all, with anything else going on at 125 East Main. And it wasn't clear at all that there was any relationship to the facade reconstruction program that was alluded to, and we don't have any plans or details about what that program is about. And I give Gabe credit for coming and beginning to discuss it. I would have actually liked to have him here right now to continue asking a few questions about that, but he's left the building, and so I think probably the appropriate thing is to find out whether he is indeed committed in some manner to a defined reconstruction of the facade. And I'm interested in knowing what agreement has been reached so far between him as the owner and the city. And we haven't had a chance for Bill Gray and the Public Works Department to inform us of those things, which we might be learning it right now. So I do feel it's an unfinished question that's hanging before the committee, And I suppose at this point, the only thing one can do is wait to see some paperwork presented in a packet so that we can study it further. So I didn't feel it was especially well handled, and I think that it helps to facilitate better coordination and of plans and for the downtown to be friendly with all the individuals who are the least willing to spend their money to help refurbish the way the downtown looks. And I'm hoping that we can continue to establish a more positive foundation with Mr. Asagi.
Ms. Barnes?
I was just going to ask if the delay of 2 weeks was a problem in terms of the work that is being planned, or...
Probably not. We'll have a pre-construction meeting probably within the next 2 weeks. So within that time frame, we could give the contractor direction at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Chenoweth?
What's the maximum amount of grant monies that this building could receive, given that it's considered 3 buildings?
Could be 3 $60,000 loans with 10% grants on each, so that'd be $18,000. And I do need to say that we have a completed program application for the first phase from Mr. Omosagi dated August 5th. So this, to some extent, is a guarantee of at least this stage of the work. There are some timing issues here that probably in fairness to the applicant should be mentioned. There was a pre-existing agreement underway by the city attorney regarding the bridge alone. That effort predated quite a bit of time the redevelopment plans of Omosagi, and we did seek to get some architecture and engineering information from the petitioner and sent a letter June 20th suggesting a development agreement to combine the up to 3 loan grant packages, the liquor license and the bridge agreement. And in the interest of time, with the contractors poised and the immediate repair needed for the bridge, he did come back and say that he wanted to proceed at this point just with the loan grants, and just with having the contractor poised after a long delay, we proceeded on that track. The development agreement was always something that we hoped to have in place. It just piecemealed. However, the loan application is we view it as a commitment to get the work done. We don't give out these loans and grants unless you do the work. There was some, and I realize the bridges are in different repair, but there was a bridge agreement with the adjacent property that essentially took the same stance, with the important exception that that bridge was in better shape. It was unclear who owned the bridge. The city, through agreement with the Baxleys, allowed for that transfer, and they now have that maintenance responsibility, and that's the goal here, except the important change that the condition of the bridge is something of a hazard. And that is not a relic of this particular property owner. This was recently purchased. It's just a relic of the many years.
Are there any other questions? Ms. Chenoweth?
Well, I have a couple of, since there's a motion on the floor, a couple of statements. First is the amount of money that we're looking at is the cost of a police officer, so it's not nominal, it's nothing to sneeze at. Second, the leverage of funds. I just did a quick calculation now that I know about the 18,000 grant, and I calculated what in terms of interest we might be paying, and then looked at the 72,000. So this is a 1-to-3 leverage essentially. Basically, we put out something close to $100,000. We get about $310,000 worth of work done. So 1-to-3. That's actually not very good in terms of what we've looked at in the past. If we look at Lincoln Stone Hall, if we look at Kmart, it's 1-to-10. It's not 1-to-3. So we get much more, or it's 10-to-1 instead of, I guess it's 3-to-1, 10-to-1. So we get much more for our buck in terms of the other development agreements that we've done. That's what was the kind of original cause for alarm in this particular situation. So if I looked at what was fair in this situation, given that the amount we're leveraging for the amount we're getting, I would say get a restaurant tenant in there within 24 months. The work has to be done within a certain time frame, and the city pays 80% of the bridge. To me, that's fair. I think that's what we should be shooting for. I don't want to set this precedent that we have where if someone comes to us and, you know, they say, I'm going to put out a couple $100,000, you know, give me $100,000 of value. To me, that's not the best use of our public funds.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Roberts?
Well, on the other hand, it's very important to encourage development downtown, and bringing in another restaurant to the city, which is maybe a kind of restaurant that many people would use during lunch, is a considerable benefit to the city and the public, and will bring revenue ultimately to the city, which may not be factored in specifically into this situation. It does make sense to me to split the cost of the bridge in some way, or remove it. I don't particularly, I mean, this bridge is pretty expensive, and it's serving basically 3 clients in the city. There's many other buildings in town that don't have direct access to the parking garage, and they're doing fine with walk-up traffic to the 2nd floor. I mean, I'm not sure that the case has been made to preserve the bridge entirely or not, but so that's just what I'm thinking.
Anyone else? All right.
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Smythe.
I was wondering if Bill has found out anything more historically about the bridges and their original construction. You find anything in the permits or anything like that?
What we found out is reflected in the whereases in the agreement, and just that original, when the bridge was built, the owner paid for the bridge at that time. There are no records on maintenance responsibility, repair responsibility.
The owner being whom? Owner paid for the bridge. The owner of the building of 123 or
123.
The owner of
123.
So what you're saying is that bridge was built by the owner of 123 originally?
The city built the bridge and was reimbursed by the owner of 123 West Main.
City built the bridge and was reimbursed. Okay, so I think that's a pretty relevant point. That means that the bridge should have been deeded over to the owner at that time.
But it wasn't.
But it wasn't. Okay.
Ms. Barnes?
You know, it's hard for us to know exactly what took place during the negotiations with our staff, and I do think we should honor the work that our staff did and make sure we understand the thinking that they had in believing that this was a good use of public funds, because I believe that they believed that and they would not have brought that to our attention. And so I think on one hand I'm supportive of getting it in writing with regard to Gabe's commitment to fix the facade and get a tenant in. I don't want to make it so that we have a deal, the deal is broken. That concerns me, because we need businesses downtown, and we have an opportunity.
Mr. Gray?
Just a little history, and I apologize that maybe I didn't bring this out at the previous meeting, but really it was in May when Desmond Associates told us the terrible condition of the bridge. So May of this year, we knew some things were going on with the remodeling plans that the applicant talked about this evening. Plans were going full steam ahead then after the May report to do the plans and specifications so we can get bids out so we can do the repairs to the deck and the bridge this year still. And we did receive bids this past week, so we moved forward with that. But there was a timing thing too, because May we realized how critical the nature was, that we weren't simply going to repair a couple of bricks or seal coat and some concrete and $2,000 later we're done. This was a major tens of thousands of dollar situation. We didn't know that prior to May. So to do a development agreement, which I understand your need for that, but we didn't literally have the time for that. So in our discussions with legal, we tried to discuss our problems, our needs to get this done quickly with the applicant here. And what we came up with was what we came up with here because of a timing issue. So it's largely a timing thing. It would have been nice had we had more time to do it, but we really can't, as I said last time, I don't think this bridge structurally will last another winter. So we really need to deal with it this fall. We have a contractor poised to do that.
Mr. Gray, it might make it more clear if you would say how much of the $72,000 would be for tearing down the bridge, so we know what the incremental...
It wasn't the way the plans and specs, the direction we gave the engineer was to remove and replace the bridge. So we don't have a distinguished cost for demolition only. It's all one lump sum. Okay. If we were to look for a change order and say we're demolishing the bridge and just repairing the wall, et cetera, I could probably get that price if you wanted to, but my gut would be it'd be probably less than 20,000, probably 15, somewhere in that range. That's my gut cost.
Thank you. Mr. Smythe.
I'd like to follow up a question here, Mr. Gray, and then make a statement. Could you clarify just real quickly the construction cost of building this bridge was paid by the previous owners. Did they also pay for maintenance over time period? They just simply ignored it?
Correct.
They built it, they paid to have it built and then ignored it?
Yes.
Is that, okay, so the fact that it wasn't deeded over to them and they weren't made aware of maintenance, were they expecting the city to continue to maintain that bridge all that time? Or have they been the ones shoveling it and pouring salt on it and all this time?
I can't speak directly to the shoveling part, but there was just no action. That's all I can tell you. We didn't look at it as our responsibility, and apparently they didn't either. The previous owners look at it either. So it wasn't until we knew we had to do work to the deck. We started to dig out the 1983 documents, the few that we found, and it was totally silent on future responsibilities, which is very unfortunate. We wouldn't be in this bind we are tonight. So, or did we have similar language for the Baxley Bridge? So we're trying to correct a problem that was unaddressed 22 years ago.
Okay.
Well, okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So, as much as, and I absolutely support downtown development. That's, something that is in our goals that we're putting together, which will come to committee next week. It's in the top tier of what we're planning to do. And yet, at the same time, as Danielle has pointed out, we're being asked to invest a lot more money than we typically do in an economic development agreement, which we don't even have in writing exactly. We have some of it in writing, but not in a typical form. And I'm comfortable spending some money on this by the city, but somebody needs to make a case about what an appropriate level of funding should be, and I need a written agreement that gives a guarantee to the citizens of Urbana that something really is going to happen there. Now, maybe that, we haven't seen that agreement exactly that Ms. Tyler's talking about. Okay, so we've got an application, which doesn't come to us typically. Okay, but I didn't see this. Is this actually mentioned in the language here? Oh, it is somewhere? Okay. It's not copied in our packet. Okay, so I don't know if people are comfortable enough with this as the written, development agreement. I'm not. Okay, I don't think it's quite enough. So.
Mr. Lewis.
I think in light of what engineering and I was kind of thinking.
You might want to speak into the microphone.
I was thinking last week as well. I don't think this thing is working anyway. But it seems as if staff has done a real good job of trying to put something together in a very short order of time. If you look at the time frame that they found out that this thing was needed to be rebuilt, and all the events that took place, I think the agreement on the application is binding. far as the applicant. Is that my understanding?
Yes, and the program is already established. There's a point system. Not everybody was on council when it was adopted, but it's our TIF redevelopment incentive program, and we upgraded those about 2 years ago. We've got a program downtown, a program for North Cunningham, and now one for Philo Road, and it's not discretionary. Either you meet the requirements of the program or you don't, but it's tied to fulfilling the downtown plan. And you get bonus points if it's an historic building, if it is a entertainment use like a restaurant, if it's vacant, there's a number of criteria. Currently in the downtown, this is our only application. And it's to help the fact that it's harder to redevelop downtown, which is why we have a TIF established there. So these used to be called facade loans, now it's called redevelopment improvement loans. Those are administered administratively because it's a program that's already been established through our TIF district and in our annual budget. It's been funded.
In terms of compliance, there's not a real issue here, right?
We have not had an issue with compliance.
Okay, we have a motion for ordinance number 2005-08-125, an ordinance approving and authorizing the execution of an agreement with Gabriel Omo Osagi, the pedestrian bridge, and the motion is to delay this until the next council. Would the clerk, you want to say something else, Mr. Jamar?
I just think it would be useful I'd like to call for a straw poll before the actual poll to see if council would support directing staff, but I don't want to put in the formal motion because I want them to have some negotiating room, to direct staff that our target is the building owner expends at least $200,000 of his own money, so not including grants or loans from the city, that things that be complete within 24 months, that it include a lease with a tenant for the first floor, and that we shoot for the city covering 80% cost of the bridge. Could I call for a straw poll vote of that? There would not be a binding vote.
Well, I've never done that before, but no reason why we can't try.
Just do a show of
How
hands
many
so that we
people
can see.
would agree with the motion that Danielle is suggesting? This is only a straw poll. Those in favor? Let me see, 1, 2, 3. Those opposed?
So it's split.
3.
Okay.
Well,
With the
we have a
motion.
tie there.
It's your call. It's your call.
Oh, it's my call? I guess so that is to negotiate with him? further?
That's a point of departure for negotiation. That's
Okay.
where we would start.
I would support that, because I think there's some concern on the council. So, now, what would you like to do, Ms. Barnes?
I would just like to make sure that our staff also understands, unless maybe the council doesn't agree with this, but this is how I feel, I just don't want this to break down.
Right.
I don't want to be sitting here a month from now and we've lost this opportunity. That's a problem. So I think we just need to be careful and mindful of that.
Okay, Mr. Bowersox.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Lynn on this one. We have some agreement, and it's verbal, even though it's not all expressed here in writing. And so my tendency would be to help document the fact that there will be some expenditures on the part of this building owner to do some big projects like the facade renovation, and to not wait too long to get it in writing and move forward. Fair?
Well, we do have the motion.
And Charlie had something.
Oh,
He was
Charlie was
Yeah, and
Mr. Smythe.
I think Mr. Omasagi made it clear that he was willing to put something in writing. Okay, I mean, that was the point of going back and forth here. And in 2 weeks, we can have this settled. I mean, I just want a written guarantee.
Okay. Ms. Barnes. Mr. Walden.
Just could I get some clarification on what we want exactly? The bridge is, we've got to go or no-go on the bridge shortly. We can wait 2 weeks, but we can't wait much longer than that. So we have to make a decision on that. The only thing that could happen is he could pledge to get a tenant, and pledge to do rehab, but if that doesn't come to fruition, what is the consequence? We want him,
He pays back 80%.
he pays back the bridge.
That's
Well, so if he doesn't get a tenant, within the prescribed period of time, you want him to pay back
or he comes back,
the entire cost of the
24 months,
bridge.
or he comes back like others.
or he comes back and asks for an extension like other development agreements have.
Well, I just want to be clear what it is you want.
Okay.
So he can say yes or no.
Ms. Barnes?
Are we directing staff then to go, we are then directing
Well,
staff
I
to go
mean,
for 80%?
we've had a straw vote, and then we're going to have a vote on your motion, I believe. Is that correct?
For 2 weeks.
To delay it for 2 weeks.
The motion is just to delay it for 2 weeks while allowing staff to negotiate with Gabe
Right.
and come back with a
Development
more firm plan or development agreement.
Right, yes.
And giving them the flexibility to make that happen so that we still end up with a restaurant in
Correct.
downtown Urbana.
Yes.
Okay.
We want the restaurant, we want the building done, but we want a written guarantee. That's all we're really saying. And he seemed to be willing to put in writing. So, that's what we're after.
Okay. Are
So
we ready to?
I could second that motion if you need a
Well,
second.
the
Okay.
motion's already been made, right? We're voting on the original motion. which
Right,
is to
which
delay-
has been a bit
Yeah,
embellished,
right.
which is fine.
Would the clerk please call the roll?
At this point, you really don't need a roll call.
We
You're
don't-
just going to send it
Well,
to the
sorry.
next city council. You just need a voice vote.
A
to do
voice
that.
vote, thank you. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. All right, on to...
Item 2 is ordinance number 2005-08-132, an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance, demolition costs associated with the Kmart site. So moved.
Second?
Is there any discussion? Okay, the motion by Mr. Smythe, seconded by Ms. Barnes. It's ordinance number 2005-08-132, an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance to allow for the demolition costs of the Kmart site. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. Bowersatz?
Yes.
Ms. Chenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis? Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
Mayor Pressing?
Yes. Mr. Smythe.
Item number 3, ordinance number 2005-08-129, an ordinance amending Schedule H of Section 23-93 of the Urbana Local Traffic Code requiring stop signs at a certain intersection, Lydia Court West at Myra Ridge Drive. So moved.
Second.
The motion by Mr. Smythe, seconded by Ms. Chenoweth. Is there any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. Bowersatz?
Yes.
Ms. Chenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis? Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
The motion carries.
Next item, ordinance number 2005-08-130, an ordinance amending Schedule L of Section 23-187 of the Urbana Local Traffic Code prohibiting parking in specified places, Romine Street at Hill Street. So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Smythe, seconded by Ms. Chenoweth. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. Bowersatz?
Yes.
Ms. Chenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis? Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
Motion carries. Are there any reports of special committees? Reports of officers. Our fire chief, Rex
I
Munn.
think Rex would like to.
Good evening. We thought we'd take a moment this evening to bring you up to date. As you may notice, the news and on the paper this evening, some fire service organizations have deployed down to the south, and we want to bring you up to speed of what's going within our city. First, as you may be aware or not, the governor of the state authorized deployment of 600 firefighters in this first phase that went into effect on Monday. That was accomplished through 4 communities within our county. We are now tooling up within Urbana to be prepared in 2 weeks to be part of the next wave, if it's called upon, to relieve the first group. And so at minimum, we're looking at deploying an officer and 3 firefighters, and depending on the availability of other volunteers and career firefighters in the area, we're looking at maybe moving up to 6, but we'll see what else of the need will be at the table at that time. There'll be a meeting this Thursday evening to lay that out and be ready to go in 2 weeks. So they'll update you on that and answer any questions you have on that.
Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any other reports of officers?
Just as we do at the beginning of each month, you have on your desk most of last month's activities in terms of economic development. It's organized for downtown activities, North Cunningham, North Lincoln, East Urbana, and the Kmart area. So you can see what's going on in the various projects. And just going around the city, Lincoln Square Village, I did talk with Jim Webster this week. I think it would be timely if in the next couple of months we brought him back to the council so he could give us an update on where he's at with that project and what his plans are. I know he's emailed the mayor, myself, and maybe others that he's considering possibly some changes to the scope, increasing the scope of that project. So I think it'd be a good timing if we could bring him back and get an update on some of the things that he's doing. At 5 Points, we do have the Walgreens is on schedule to open in October. We do have plans that we're reviewing administratively for both from an engineering perspective, particularly both the development of both sides of the 5 Points intersection. So that's something that certainly will change the entryway to the city, and we're taking a look at that with the developers right now. As you know, in North Cunningham, O'Brien continues to make progress, although slow. There are at least four buildings that are up and being enclosed for construction. We're working on the development of outlots along the North Cunningham corridor with various developers. The North Lincoln projects at Holiday Inn is coming along quite quickly, and if you haven't noticed, the $20 million or so development just south of the Holiday Inn site, which is the Capstone Development condos, is now under construction. A considerable amount of earth being moved in that area. The Super Walmart, Aldi, and other developments are in the works, of course, along Route 130. One thing of interest to note for you is there is a large land auction that will take place along the 130 corridor this next month. There's over 400 acres in that land auction, and that will really determine what's going to happen in that corridor. Probably more than any other action that we could take at the city, that's going to be a very significant action. So that's going to happen, and we're working with the folks that are auctioning the property and the auctioneer to make sure that everyone is familiar with our comp plan and what we have planned for the area. You may be aware the university has two RFPs out in Urbana, or RFQs actually. One is for replacement of graduate student housing at Goodwin and Green, and the other is for the property that they wish to dispose of for the appropriate type of development at the corner of Lincoln and University. And those are on the street right now. We are receiving calls between development and my office, Bill, about proposals to respond to the university RFQs. Of course, we're working. We received additional plans from Chris Creek today on the Kmart redevelopment. He continues to work along on that. The Prairie Winds development is proceeding with several units that are now finished and for sale in that area. And then we continue to work with other businesses in the Sunnycrest area, including County Market, on rehabilitation or improvements to their facilities. So those are some of the things around the city that are going on that are resulting from some of the development agreements that we did earlier this year.
Ms. Barnes.
I have a question. Savannah Green, I noticed there's a bit of a change and a little bit more movement there. Are we headed in the right path, or is that going to get back on track?
Well, I think we're headed in the right path, but this is Bill's project to some degree, and he's working with the developer and potential owner on clarification of ownership for that, and that really needs to take place before they finish out the subdivision. But Bill, maybe you could respond.
We had a meeting with Vic Armstrong last Monday and going over kind of priorities and had those discussions. It's still, I'm not aware of any final court action at this time yet, or we haven't received that call yet, so it should be any day. It should be happening very soon. So he hopes to be the owner, if you will, of the properties, but he'd like to finish up the 30 or so homes that are at least shelled out and finish those up and sell those. He'd like to get Smith Road in ASAP and the other streets in.
Where does lighting stand on the priority list?
Lighting would probably occur in '06 for the reason that you want to make sure that the roads are all done so you can have one contractor come in and do all the lighting throughout the whole subdivision. And he wants to spend time in doing punch list items and selling these 30 homes that are partially completed. So that's pretty much his first order of business. Oh, and then the repair of streets too. And try to do that this year yet. And there's a lot of repairs for existing streets and sidewalks.
Okay, thank you.
Are there, Mr. Roberts?
Can you tell me a little bit about the Emulsicoat move? Are they moving their facility to North Lincoln, or is it just an extension?
Well, I'll have Libby respond to the project since that's an active plan case.
They're initially going to be moving some of their operations to North Lincoln, and probably eventually that will become their primary location. So
that
University Avenue location eventually will be redeveloped, but not initially.
That's a pretty impressive new development for us, then, isn't it? Cool. Okay, that's what I was wondering.
Mr. Smythe?
Bruce, so there's specific interest for redeveloping the O'Brien property at 5 Points. Is that the way
Well, we approved a development agreement, and that is with Joe Petrie and another partner, and we just recently received a preliminary site plan, but of course, really nothing can happen concrete until O'Brien finishes their mega complex and relocates to that new location. So, and then we have the complexity of construction seasons and all of that. So, when that actually gets going, I don't know, but we did receive some engineering plans for potential layouts for that site, so that was helpful to us in our planning. But it's helpful to us to try to plan, and Bill will be the first to advocate for this, to try to plan both sides of the Cunningham in conjunction with one another so we can determine traffic impacts. So we're promoting that.
Okay. And so are there some competitive possibilities with the RFQ for the graduate student housing for Green and Lincoln replacement?
I don't know. I haven't seen what has been submitted to the university.
Yeah, because I think that's a potentially a very nice, very big project. I'd like to see something.
It could be if it was new construction and if there's space for it.
Well, yeah,
right.
Well, there's finding the space. I know, right. And so I hope that some competitive stuff comes our way on that one.
Me too.
So, thank you.
Okay, any other officers have reports? Well, I'd like to report as the mayor. We talked about the fringe road agreement that the county wanted to limit the amount of money that's spent on fringe roads from their funds, their motor fuel tax funds, to $1 million a year, and allow their amount that's spent on their, I think they have fewer than 200 miles of road, of county roads, spend $2 million of their money on that, and then allow that to expand while they freeze the urban fringe part. My concern was that most of this money is paid for by people who live in Champaign-Urbana and the fringe areas, and I wanted to set up a meeting with the two city councils and the county board for September 21st, and the county board has suggested that we have another meeting before that, and that will be this Friday. So if anyone would like to come to that, we're going to have facts and figures on why we think that they need to change their policy and be more fair to the people who are actually paying the taxes and driving on the roads. I've also contacted, did you have a question about that?
Yeah, will that be a joint meeting? And
Well, it's not a full meeting to be held here. It's going to be held at the county, but if anyone would like to attend, I think it would be useful to do that.
Place and time?
10 o'clock at the Brookins, 10 o'clock in the morning. And I've also contacted Congressman Johnson's office about bills pending in Congress which would eliminate the right of cities to negotiate individual franchise agreements with local cable television providers.
Thank you.
and also talk with his office about the problem, the tragedy that happened in the southern United States. We have the train service, the city of New Orleans, and it seemed to me it might be kind of logical for that to be used as an evacuation route for people. And they're, we're tied to New Orleans by that train service, and so our congressman's on the transportation committee, so we'll see if Amtrak can help in the evacuation. And we got an award. Urbana got a special recognition award from the Combined Charities Campaign for having the largest % increase in overall giving for a large employer for the fall 2004 campaign. And if anybody would like to contribute to the hurricane victims, if you're a member of the public or an employee, we're accepting checks to the American Red Cross. Okay. Next, new business. Ordinance number 2005-09-135, an ordinance approving a special use permit to establish an accessory parking lot within 600 feet of the R1, R2, or R3 zoning district.
Good evening. This is the first case related to this ordinance that was passed in February 2005 regarding accessory parking lots. The Canaan Baptist, the parking lot here at 306 West Locust has actually been a zoning enforcement case that we've been working on for many, many years, far before I worked for the city. But there's a brief rundown of the case history. In 1999, the church built their elementary school, and according to the zoning ordinance, they were required to construct 34 parking spaces. They had originally submitted a site plan that showed 2 individual locations that would meet this requirement, and the city issued a temporary certificate of occupancy based on the condition that they would construct this parking. They did not initially, and then in October 2001, our Building Safety Division was alerted to a parking lot that was constructed at 306 West Locust, which is the one in question here. It wasn't previously approved on anything that the church had given us, and basically it was built with several violations to the zoning ordinance. Building Safety contacted the church to arrange a meeting to figure out how we could bring the parking lot into compliance. And at this time, the elementary school was still being occupied without a final certificate of occupancy. Then over the next several years, there was some back and forth. And in June 2003, Community Development notified the church that they were still in violation of their temporary certificate of occupancy, and that the required parking must be constructed, or the church would have to cease use of the elementary school and the parking lot. The code violations were not addressed, and the elementary school did not have the required amount of parking. And because of the continued failure of the church to address these concerns, Community Development referred the case to the legal division, and in June of this year, the city filed a legal complaint against the church. And currently, the church and the city are working together to address the complaint that the city filed. And you can see in Exhibit H, which is our schedule for basically fixing the problems. There's a long list that we've negotiated in good faith with the church that kind of outlines the steps and the dates for basically getting this site in compliance. And then in an unrelated attempt to address parking lot concerns in Urbana, in February of this year, the City Council passed the ordinance that required an accessory parking lot within 600 feet of the R1, 2, or 3 districts to get a special use permit. And although the lot at 306 was constructed prior to this amendment being passed, since it was never fully in zone, and since it was never a legal lot, and now in order to become legal, they have to completely meet all provisions of the zoning ordinance, which includes getting a special use permit. As you can see, it's kind of a parking lot surrounded by higher density residential uses. There is one neighborhood business immediately north, and then there's also the church property itself, and then the elementary school, which is related to the church. And I believe it's a mixture of owner and rental occupied housing. But 3 major changes that the revised site plans are correcting with the parking lot. They're removing excess asphalt, which is basically going to restore the required setbacks in the front and the side, which are 10 and 15 respectively. They're going to install required screening. There's a site plan included in your packet that shows they're going to be constructing or installing shrubs along the eastern and western border of the lot, and they're also preserving the existing street trees along Locust there. And they're also going to provide drainage facilities, and the site basically drains to the southeast, and they're installing a curb and drainage inlets to accommodate that. As I said, there's 34 total spaces that are required for the elementary school, and this site plan indicates that they will be constructing 16 at this site, and so there's still an additional 18 required in order to become compliant with the zoning ordinance. The changes to the lot at 306 West Locust, according to our agreement, have to be completed by October 31st of this year. And also by October 31st of this year, the church has to come to the city with plans to accommodate the additional 18 spaces. There's a long discussion at the Planning Commission. There are several points, and first and foremost, the Planning Commission wished to convey their understanding that if the church does not construct the required improvements by October 31st of this year, that the special use permit becomes null and void, and the church would have to go through the special use permit process again. One of the questions that the commissioners asked us is why we are bringing basically what would be a case that would make the church only partially compliant with the zoning ordinance, and our response to that was, obviously this has been a long-term zoning enforcement case. We've been negotiating with the church in good faith, and they've come to us, and we've worked with them, and it's our understanding and the church's understanding that all 34 spaces will be provided, even though we're doing it in sort of a piecemeal fashion. So, the requirements for a special use permit, it's kind of going over these, that the proposed use is conducive to the public convenience. Urban churches can have a positive influence, and the city has typically been fairly supportive of them. This includes the realization parking is a necessity for a church, and the zoning ordinance basically has provisions that help minimize the impact of a parking lot. And for points 2 and 3 here, that the proposed use is designed to not affect the district, or that the use complies with all of our regulations. That's basically the same answer to these as the provisions of the zoning ordinance as far as setbacks, screening, and drainage go. They'll meet all of those, and so they'll hopefully minimize the impact of the parking lot. And the ordinance that was passed specifically for accessory parking lots that need to get a special use permit, there's several other provisions that they have to meet. And the first one is that there's going to be protection of adjacent residences from lighting. The site plan doesn't indicate any lighting, so it's not a problem. Provision of drainage facilities, as I mentioned, they're going to be curbing the eastern and southern borders of the property and installing drainage inlets, which will feed into city sewers. Conformance with landscape buffering and fencing requirements. So they're going to put in shrubs and to keep existing street trees. And provision for safe traffic access. You can access the lot from Locust Street via an access drive. There's also a public alley along the northern side of the lot. So our summary of findings quickly is that the improved parking lot is conducive to the public convenience at this location. It allows the church to provide more parking spaces to meet parking demand during school and church. The improved parking lot would not propose a detriment to the district in which it is proposed to be located. Drainage and access considerations have been addressed and should not create problems. The improved parking lot will meet all applicable standards and regulations of the district in which it is located. The improved parking lot will be adequately screened with landscaping materials. And the improved parking lot will be generally compatible with the existing land use pattern of the site and surrounding area. So in Planning Case 1949 SU05, City Council has 3 options. 1, you can approve the request for a special use permit without any additional conditions. 2, you can approve the request for a special use permit with any conditions deemed appropriate or necessary. Or 3, you can deny the request for a special use permit. And based on the evidence presented in the discussion above, the Plan Commission and staff recommend that the City Council approve Plan Case 1949 SU05 with the following conditions. 1, that the updated site plan shall be revised to address any remaining concerns or comments from the Building Safety Division. 2, that the layout of the parking lot shall closely resemble site plans approved by the City of Urbana for the July 27, 2005 scheduled complaint abatement attached as Exhibit H. Any significant deviation from the site plan will require an amendment to the special use permit, including further review by the Plan Commission and approval by City Council. And 3, that all improvements to the parking lot be made by October 31st, 2005. I can answer any specific questions you have regarding the special use permit application. As I mentioned, it's a long, ongoing case, and Libby can help out with more of the general questions. And as I understand it, there's also 2 representatives in attendance from the church tonight.
Mr. Rose.
What steps have been taken by the church representatives to locate and procure property for the additional sites that are going to be required for them to come up with so fast?
My understanding is that the church owns several additional properties in the area. Which ones specifically they are, I can't speak to, but I think definitely the representatives could possibly tell you which sites they own. And I don't know if Libby has anything to add, if the church has indicated which sites they are looking at. But as I mentioned, by October 31st of this year, that would be the time that they would formally submit those plans to us. So I don't know if they've indicated as of yet.
And are these properties have houses on them, or are they vacant?
Houses.
Or do we know this?
They have houses.
Houses. So there'd be a demolition required?
Well, I don't know what sites they own or are looking at, so I really can't speak to that.
Mr. Bowersox.
Yeah, is it your interpretation that the wording as is of condition number 3 would mean that after October 31, if the parking lot improvements weren't made, automatically the special use permit would be null and void?
Yes, that was our discussion that we had with the Plan Commission. That condition 3 would basically make the special use permit null and void if they didn't meet the conditions that we approve.
Okay. My second question is, it seems that the conditions don't include them having to bring back a plan for the other spaces to fill out the 34 by October 31. So how are we guaranteeing that part of their compliance?
I think the way that we've guaranteed compliance with that is by the complaint that we filed in court, and that has been the most effective way of bringing the church to the bargaining table.
Thanks.
Ms. Chenoweth.
I'm familiar with this case, having had at least a year of conversations about it. And kudos to staff and to the church for working together to try to address some of these issues. The concern I have is that, and I haven't gotten a chance to talk to, this is my ward, I haven't gotten a chance to talk to the neighbors. Typically, a parking requirement exists in part to keep the cars off of the street and keep the street from being flooded with cars. In this case, because I believe an additional parking lot would require a demolition of a house, I'm not convinced that people in the neighborhood actually would prefer demolition over having cars on the street. So one of the things that to speak to this particular thing, we should move this forward. This is important. This is the right direction to go. We need to get the special use permit process moving. In terms of step 2, which is the additional 18 to 20 spaces that will be created, I'm concerned about demolitions. I happen to know from talking to Strawberry Fields that Strawberry Fields allows Canaan Baptist Church to use their parking lot on Sundays for overflow parking. I believe that's still the case. Yes, I'm seeing nods. So it may be the case that we don't need another demolition in this neighborhood, that we can accommodate parking in creative ways, both working with Strawberry Fields on Sundays. They've been extremely generous in providing their parking lot. Perhaps considering a waiver for the rest of the parking so that we don't kind of create an incentive for neighborhood deterioration. What are your thoughts? What is staff's conversation about this?
Well, as far as waiving the additional parking requirements, I don't know if Libby would have anything to add to that. there was discussion at the Plan Commission regarding design assistance or other sort of creative ways of helping the church meet their requirements. I don't think that's a promise that would exclude demolition, but I think it's at least a step in the appropriate direction.
Libby?
One option the church could explore is an agreement with nearby properties within 600 feet for some allowance for parking. We'd have to look at weekend versus weekday use. We're open to that. That's a possibility. It wouldn't necessarily be a waiver. It would be a variance. It would come to city council, and it would have to demonstrate rationale for a variance. It was a unique case. So we do have parking, off-street parking requirements in place for a reason, although there's occasionally circumstances that might warrant a reduction.
A quick follow-up question, just to understand the parking requirement. The parking requirement is for the school, not the church. Okay, yes. So the school has drop-off and pick-up, and they have employees, et cetera. I'd be curious to hear from the representatives of Canaan Baptist Church where the employees currently park. Is there a solution that you already have in place for your employees to have parking nearby, even if it's not within 600 feet?
Please state your name and address.
My name is Morris Davis, 602 West Central Thomasboro. Deacon, Junior Deacon Morris Davis.
Willie Somerville, 809 Ayrshire Circle, an employee of the school.
Currently, the parking arrangement is that they are utilizing the parking lot that is currently the uncorrect parking lot. They are currently using that, and I think it has 18 spaces right now, but we know that will be reduced when it is brought into compliance. So that is what the teachers use, and that is enough parking for the teachers.
How many staff members do you have, full-time staff who are there during the day, during the week, teachers and administrators, pastors?
Well, there are actually two parking lots. Now, the pastor parks in the parking lot between the church. The pastor and the staff of the church park in a different parking lot, so this is only utilized for the teachers. Okay. And I'm not sure of the number of teachers, but there are only 5 grades.
Some of them are combined. We would say 8 full-time staff, maybe 8 to 10. I'm part-time.
Okay.
So there is enough parking for staff. Actually, we also park 3 vans there currently, so there's enough parking.
What would you use an additional parking lot for?
For the requirement for the city.
Okay, but you would...
I don't know.
You would not use it for staff and teachers?
I don't particularly know.
Okay.
I've been involved in this for 8 months, so
okay.
I'm not being facetious. I don't know what the additional parking is to be used for.
Okay. That's all I wanted to know. I think that in some ways helps to illustrate that there are certain instances in which our parking requirement, especially because this is a very urban situation, at least for Urbana, it's an urban situation. It's between campus and downtown. It's a very dense environment, and I think that we need to look at how to allow for a decrease in our required parking in these kind of instances. Otherwise, basically, we're going to see the demolition of some of the lovely homes that you all own in that area. I would not like to see that demolition.
Mr. Smythe?
Yeah, I guess echoing Danielle's concerns, remember the furor that was raised at the very end of the previous council's term concerning the amount of asphalt at the church on Green Street, First Presbyterian Church there. Again, a big parking lot that's empty most of the week, used on Sundays. So I guess the question for staff would be, why do we have such a large requirement here? Is it based on something?
The requirement in the zoning ordinance is 1 parking space per 30 classroom seats, which basically amounts to 1 per teacher per classroom.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is that the school building itself then is underutilized if they only have a need for 14 or 16 spaces.
I'm not really familiar with how they use it.
At this time, it is definitely underutilized. We're not at capacity. I think we're at 50%, maybe 60%.
Okay, so for the moment you're covered, but conceivably, if the church or the school population were to grow, your needs could change.
Could change, yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Barnes?
I move that we approve ordinance number 2005-09-135, an ordinance approving a special use permit, but with with the additional conditions as noted in the recommendation by staff.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Barnes, seconded by Ms. Chenoweth. Is there any further discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. Bowersox?
Yes.
Ms. Chenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
Motion carries. Okay, thank you very much. For the next, would you like to just do these all as a group to save time?
Yes.
Okay. The first is the grants management manager, and you've got the information there on John Schneider, a letter from me, a letter from Bruce Walden, and then his resume. He used to be an employee of the city of Urbana and most recently in the city of Champaign. The next appointment would be to Boneyard Creek Commissioner Clark Bullard. He's a research professor in mechanical engineering at the University of Illinois, and he's had a long-term interest in this, and I've asked him to think about how our approach to the Boneyard could be improved. Third is the Fine Arts Review Committee. This is for a specific building that the state is building, and they always have an arts component, and they're asking us to appoint someone, and I'm recommending Theodore Zernich, who's a retired former director and professor of the School of Art and Design at the University of Illinois. And then for the Mayor's Task Force on the Citizens Police Review, I'm recommending Assistant Chief Mike Bealey, Urbana Police, Anthony Cobb, the President of the Urbana Lodge Number 70 Fraternal Order of Police, Ricky Baldwin, Co-Coordinator of the Coalition for Citizen Police Review, Jennifer Walling, Co-Coordinator Coalition for Citizen Police Review, Reverend Zerniel Bogan, Carol Ammons, CU Citizens for Peace and Justice, Tracy Parsons of the Urban League, Elaine Gehrman, Esther Patt of the ACLU, and Reverend Troy Burks representing the NAACP. Are there any questions? Is there a motion to approve the appointments?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Bowersox, seconded by Mr. Smythe. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Carries. Okay, next is ordinance number 2005-09-134, an ordinance amending Chapter 14 of the Code of Ordinances, City of Urbana, Illinois, adding domestic partnership registration fees in the schedule of fees.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Chenoweth, seconded by Mr. Bowersox. Is there any discussion? If not, would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. Bowersox?
Yes.
Ms. Chenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis? Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes.
The motion carries. Next, we have a discussion of the IDOT report on traffic stop data, and for public participation, I know Tracy Parsons asked to speak. Would you like to speak now? Or would you like to wait until the report is complete? Okay. Let's start with Chief Adair.
Good evening. As the council's mandate back in July for additional data to be provided by the department, we're here tonight to give you the results of that yeoman's effort on the part of the Assistant Chief Mike Bealey, who I delegated to get this information collected, along with my part-time employee that does all of the statistical data for the police department, Mrs. Pat Moose. And as a result of their efforts over an extended period of time, we do have a prepared report to present to you briefly tonight, take questions from the council, after which I'll have some final comments. With that, I'll give the mic to Assistant Chief Mike Bealey.
Good evening.
Good evening. Hi.
I believe everybody got in their council packet the updated version of our traffic stop data. First, I'd like to address a couple comments that were made in the public comment section prior to this meeting. Civil rights protection and racial profiling are paramount for us. We want to do the same things that some of our speakers have commented on tonight. Setting a benchmark was mentioned. Before I get into the report, I want to address that. I don't believe that's the answer, because we can make the numbers whatever the council needed them to be. If we needed that number to be 1.12, our officers could just stop people in different locations. Our officers attempt to stop people based on their perceived need. October the 6th is the next first Thursday meeting. That was discussed earlier. We've had one of those, the next one on October the 6th, and I'm not sure they've secured the location. I know they're working on it. That will specifically deal with, amongst other things, the IDOT report.
What time is that?
I believe it's at 7 o'clock. I know a press release has been prepared and will go out in the next day or two. Most important, I think, with the data is the discussion that follows. The discussion internally, and we've had a lot of it, the discussion that we hope to take place externally, and of course discussion with council. As the chief said, it was somewhat of a monumental undertaking to collect this, because we were not set up to break it down in the format that it's presented to you tonight. I believe in the future we will be, because we now see the steps that we need to go through to put this stuff together. I do not want to go through and make comments on all the individual tables. I think that from the July council meeting, when several of you requested additional breakdowns, I think we have most of that covered. We looked at the Champaign report, which was passed around on that night. We tried to mimic much of what they had. I do want to point out that I believe we had a draft copy of the Urbana Police traffic stop numbers out initially. The final one changed very slightly. It's attached. The recommendations I have at the end here, and I will go over a couple of those. There was some questions about the beat map, how we deploy our officers, and we can have further discussion if council has questions on it. It's basically 4 different beats within the city. Speaker tonight questioned what the crime statistics were included in this when they were not called for by the IDOT study or the law. We feel that because much of what the police department does is driven by calls for service, and those calls from service come from specific areas of the city, that's where our police officers are at. So I do believe there is a correlation between our high crime areas, our calls for service, and traffic stops. Anyway, that map is included in there for you. To go over some of the conclusions, we certainly need to collect additional information on traffic stops. We need to do a much better job of putting together and distributing our traffic stop data in this format or with additional details when the 2005 IDOT traffic stop study becomes available next summer. Certainly we need to improve our dialogue with the entire community, but the minority community specifically. Our first Thursday meetings will be a start, but we're open to any additional venues that anybody else would like to suggest. The issues of false traffic stops I know were discussed at the last time this was brought up with council. If somebody believes they were based solely on race, there is a mechanism that can be looked at. The chief or I, or any supervisor in our department, can be and should be contacted should anybody believe that they were stopped based solely on race. We invite those inquiries. I know one council person, I believe Danielle, had spoken with somebody, even if she could bring that information forward. That, I understand people don't necessarily always want to come and speak with us. We can certainly look into that and come up with the answers. Our officers need to be absolutely clear what the reason for the traffic stop is when they stop someone, and that reason must be clearly conveyed to the motorist. I think communication is very important. We videotape all of our traffic stops. We review those videotapes to make sure our officers are conducting themselves in the method and following the procedures they should be, and we expect that review to continue. We need to continue to train internally to make sure our published procedures for traffic stop information collection are fully understood and complied with by our officers. We need to look at additional training opportunities. I know Champaign is already doing some training. I've been in contact with them to find out what they think are the benefits. I've talked with a Human Relations officer at great length on training opportunities she thinks might be beneficial to us. Many of the officers within our department that I've spoken with feel that it's a little bit of a two-way street, that we need to educate the public and to some extent the council concerning the job we do and the methods we employed and why we do some of the things that we do. I would like, before I take questions, to read. In our internal discussions, I got a lot of feedback, as you can imagine, from our officers who are really the focus of this IDOT study and the focus of these discussions, but they don't get the opportunity to come up and speak publicly. They will at the first Thursday meetings or any other venues that we can set up. They're very eager to speak with the public concerning these issues, and not just white officers, but minority officers who live within the city also. Two comments that I thought were particularly telling from our officers. One, I'm not going to identify, but this is a minority officer who lives in the city of Urbana and who I believe has been the subject of racial profiling in other areas. He writes, ultimately, I believe there must be made clear that our traffic enforcement statistics are not the issue. The true issue is a much broader societal one having to do with the plight of people living in low-income environments and the fact that minorities are overrepresented in those areas. It is an issue of public education, public and Section 8 housing, and every other institutional aspect of our society at the local level, none of which are under the control of the police. We merely deal with the unfortunate aftermath the best we can, and this puts us in areas where we see the violation that are being documented in the IDOT study. I think there are still places in this state where a minority means you will be targeted arbitrarily by the police. Urbana is not one of those places. The other comment comes from a white officer who's worked here for 16 years, and he's a supervisor. For the 16 years that I have been here, the officers of this department have been trained to do their job without considering the race, age, religion, or ethnicity of the people involved. I believe that this study, and now the focus, is pushing officers toward considering race when making a stop or taking enforcement action. I do not believe this is in the best, I do not believe that this is in the community's interest to have officers trying to actively balance their stops or tickets, and I believe this point needs to be made. I thought those two comments were reflective of the police officers at Urbana and their feelings. Questions concerning the numerous tables? Is this what you were looking for?
Mr. Bowersox.
Yeah, I'd first say thank you very much. It is clear that you, especially Assistant Chief Bailey, as well as Pat Moose and the Chief, have done a lot to pull together information and maps and make recommendations which are very heartening to me as the first steps towards, having a community dialogue and addressing the issue. So thank you very much. I have a number of brief questions. One is, you said that Champaign had a training source and that you talked to them about how it was helpful. Have you learned that there is some source they're using or some training that's something we would end up employing?
This issue obviously has been statewide. Every police department in the state is experiencing the same dialogue that we are. Rather than just jump to what Champaign is doing, Vasilia Clark has some suggestions, Champaign has some suggestions. I think it's prudent to evaluate what's out there and what would give us the biggest benefit.
Mm-hmm. One of the most heartening things is in the recommendations that you're seeking to increase dialogue with the minority community, and that the first Thursday meetings are one step and additional venues should be explored. And you're absolutely right. It has to be a two-way street. The community has to hear from the police, and I hope the venues facilitate that so that the community understands the methodologies the police are using, and the police are hearing from the community about their perspectives and how they feel they're treated and how stops work. So that dialogue is a two-way street, like you said, and is really important. Do you have any thoughts about additional venues? Is the First Thursday program something that we just advertise better and bring more people to, or are you thinking that that has a sort of different focus than the sort of dialogue that you want to see?
Interestingly enough, the First Thursday meetings were conceived by the officers well in advance of the IDOT study. We're just slow in getting them started. Initially, that was conceived to be an every other month meeting. I've bumped it up to once a month. We're going to spread them all over town. They're securing different locations now, north, south, hopefully a campus location. Our first one right here in the council chambers. I do know that the first meeting was announced, press release to all of the news stations, the TV stations. The News Gazette ran an article on it. We're going to try to improve upon our announcements. Maybe it's a timing thing. Maybe Thursday night isn't the best time. I think that most Thursdays we want to touch on a variety of topics that will be the two-way, that will educate the public on how we do our job and why we do the things we do. But certainly this, I suspect, will be a component of it for some time in the future. Virtually any group that would want to discuss this, we would be willing to send a representative, either Chief or I, or we have lots of police officers that are willing to speak on this topic.
Thank you.
Mr. Smythe.
Two real quick ones. How close does Table 2, which is the IDOT reported demographic breakdown, actually compare to our own census numbers?
The census number, and that's one difference that I noted in Champaign. That's one more table that we did not get into. We didn't do that breakdown, so I can't tell you off the top of my head what that comparison would be.
Okay. Yeah, because I realize it's also, you've got driving age census stuff. I just wonder if these are, it'd be helpful if these are based on 2000 numbers, 2000 census numbers. It could be totally wrong.
Right.
This is, we're halfway into the next, we're halfway into the decade.
I understand what you're saying. The IDOT formula where they come up with their minority driving population, I think, is come up with it by a variety of things, licensed drivers in the community, the census data. They have some kind of formula which most cities in the state are taking great exception to, some going to great expense to conduct their own minority driving census, if you will. I personally don't believe that's necessary. All it does is changes the numbers slightly.
Okay, so in your opinion, you think these are approximately correct?
I think they're approximately correct. Whether they went up or down, we would still have the same basic issue and need for the community dialogue.
Yeah.
So, I think they're approximately correct.
Okay, and then next year, when you do this again, could you do me a favor and break down the 31 to 60 age group into at least two categories? Because 31-year-olds are a lot different from 60-year-olds.
When we were putting this together, I asked our statistician, our part-time statistician, why we have these breakdowns, because they didn't make any sense to me either. Apparently, when we started doing crime statistics a long time ago, these numbers were used for crime data and other things, and I am told that these groups actually come out of a request from City Council many years ago. But yes, I
remember what kind of driver I was in my early 30s, and I know what kind of driver I am in my 50s.
I'll certainly see what I can do. If you want to send me an email with some suggested age groups, we'll be happy to try to comply with
Usually
that.
the data help guide you on the splits when you're doing histograms and stuff like this. So,
all right.
Ms. Chenoweth?
Are you finished, Charlie? Yeah. Okay. The information specifically about location, age, and gender is extremely helpful. Thank you for preparing that. I know this looks like a huge amount of work, and it's always a balance how much we want to actually track things versus do things about them. And sometimes we need good information to actually respond to the problem.
I agree.
So, in fact, there was an article in the News Gazette about Chicago addressing the very same issue of racial profiling just in the last week, and so I feel like as a country we're finally, in some ways, responding to starting the dialogue and starting to take responsibility for some of this data. So I'm happy to see us move in that direction. Couple of questions. There is something here on page 3 that says verbal warning stop card, and it looks like there was no verbal warnings given. I believe the chief addressed that the last time he spoke. He said that he stopped the process of verbal warnings, and now all warnings are written.
I'm sorry. Can you?
This
Page
is
3.
under page 3, outcome of stop. At the very bottom, it says citation.
Oh, on our actual IDOT report.
This is, the
on the
correct
actual
IDOT
IDOT
report.
report.
Yeah, page 3 of the IDOT report.
Okay.
What is a stop card, and do we have that?
Stop cards, when the IDOT information is reported, under the law, they gave us 3 choices. You either, because you have to document them, each stop, each traffic stop for a traffic violation. You could write a warning ticket. You could write a traffic ticket, or the law refers to what is called a stop card, and that's just, I guess, a documentation of a verbal warning. We elected to go to written warnings.
So we do not use stop cards, and we always have a written warning whenever there's a stop.
If it's a traffic stop, yes.
If it's a traffic stop.
That is correct.
Okay. What defines a traffic stop? That someone's in a car, or that
A traffic stop, according to the law, is if we stop somebody for a traffic violation.
Okay. So if we stop them for questioning about, because they happen to be within a certain range of a scene of a crime, that's not a traffic stop.
All that is specifically excluded in the law. If somebody's coming out behind a bank at 3 o'clock in the morning and they're stopped for suspicious reasons, articulable suspicious reasons, that's specifically excluded from the IDOT study.
Okay. That helps a little bit to explain the disparity between hearing about people
Yes.
being stopped with not, no explanation, and they don't get a particular written warning, and the statements before that everyone always gets a written warning.
I believe that is part of the confusion, yes.
Okay.
We are still requiring our officers on those suspicious stop occasions to fill out what we call an FI card, a field interrogation card. So we should have record of everybody we stop. If it's not for a traffic violation, it's excluded from this data.
So there's always a record in addition to the audio, video.
Yes.
So there's an interrogation card.
Yes.
Does the person stopped receive anything when there's an interrogation card?
No, it's a field interview card, but no, they wouldn't. We just basically, rather than jot down their name and address, phone number, whatever, on a piece of paper in our pocket, which is what we used to do a long time ago, we now require them to fill out a field interview card so that there is record of it.
Does it include race information?
Yes.
It does.
Yes.
Looking at page 12, it's great to have recommendations, and in some ways I feel like this starts going in the right direction, and it includes a lot of the things I'd like to see, maybe not as specifically as I'd like to see them, but at least it's
a start.
It's definitely a start. The number 3, it's been great to see Champaign set up a series of conversations with the community. Champaign is not Urbana. We have different histories. I'm not saying that we mimic them. In fact, they have much more severe data on consent searches and equipment violation stops for African Americans than Urbana does, and I think that that's something they're taking seriously, and they should take seriously, because it really comes into the issue of consent searches that, as I understand it, where civil rights violations occur. So if we could publicize those much better, that would be great. In particular, it really, in addition to going to the news agencies, I think it's important that the first Thursday meetings be publicized to the African American organizations in town, making sure that we get the Ministerial Alliance, the churches, the NAACP, Urban League, et cetera. So if we can just make a list where we're continuously sending out information about those things, that would be great.
We want additional people.
Exclusive to the minority community. There are other issues as well, like all the neighborhood groups, but we should definitely cover those.
We'd prefer to have more people there than less people, so any suggestions to build our communication list would be helpful.
Okay. For council members, if we receive a plain text email, that not an attachment, some 6 megabyte thing, but just a plain text email that says who, what, when, where, and you send it to us, between us, we probably reach 1,500 people or something with our list. So if you could include that and get out to folks, that would be great. The second, I was excited to see that the issue of false stops addressed in your recommendations. If someone, as you say, if someone believes that they were stopped solely on the basis of race, a system of inquiry should be available to that person. Currently, it's and receive feedback without fear of retribution. We do have a complaint process. I think that complaint process is inadequate, and I would urge the police department, and as we know tonight, have created a task force on the Citizen Review Board of Police issue to work with this task force to come up with the most effective, cost-efficient, professional police review board process that we can. So I'd like to see the police actually take a stand in support of a civilian review board of police, and your participation on the board, certainly on the task force, helps to show that. The third thing is, I'm just kind of going down the list here. In terms of outreach, we know that our police department is stretched in terms of our services, and looking at beat number 4, it's huge. I mean, you have a huge beat, and I know the intention in the future is to split that in two and to have the 2 beats, and I think that's the right approach. it would be useful for the council to know the kinds of outreach activities that the police department engages in, and to see if we can help the department in some way increase the outreach work that the police department does. So the fire department has a significant, maybe they just have too much time on their hands, I'm not sure, but the fire department has a significant outreach component to the department. And I think that that's a lot of what the fire department does is prevention. Similarly, it would be nice to see the police department also have the time and resources and novel ideas, et cetera, to do prevention and to do early intervention, to establish relationships with kids and families and the community. And so if we could get direction from your department in terms of what the council can do to help you, in addition to adding to the police officer force, which we've definitely taken measures to do, if there are other things that we can do to increase the outreach opportunities that the police department has, that would be great. If I look under bullet point, all traffic stops are being videotaped, it says supervisors should continue to conduct periodic reviews of their assigned officers. I'd like to see that word changed to will, so that it's actually a pledge on the part of the police department that supervisors will regularly conduct reviews of their assigned officers' conduct on traffic stops. I think that's an important feedback loop, and I know that when time gets tight, that's one of the first things that gets taken off the plate, and I think it's important that we have that kind of review process and oversight process. The last comment I'll make is I was happy to see the kind of early warning system, that's your last bullet point, that the individual officer stats would be reviewed by the department to look for abnormalities, etc. I like to see systems of self-correction before the IDOT report is even released, ways in which officers can receive feedback about their traffic stop information vis-a-vis their peers on a similar beat at similar times, etc. So I think that's a really useful point as well. That's all I have.
Mr. Roberts.
Thanks. I had two questions. On page 3, you have a chart that says reason for the stop. And the last item, which is the fourth item in the reason for the stop, is licensing/registration violations. And I'm kind of wondering, can you explain how that knowledge, which would seem to be invisible until you had a discussion or saw you approached the driver and either asked for his driving license or his registration materials, could initiate a stop?
That, I believe, would include stickers on license plates being expired.
Okay.
Or the temporary stickers in windows being expired, they're 5-day, 7-day. Or I believe that also includes driver's license information if a plate were run on a computer and it come back with a suspended driver, or a driver with no valid driver's license, which is more common than what you would think. That would initiate a traffic stop.
So are these stops often occurring where you're pulled up behind somebody and you notice you scan their license plate?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Right. On page 12, when you have your conclusions and recommendations, I was also looking at, which Danielle actually just addressed, that the stops are videotaped. And I think, yes, it would be a useful thing to review them. So I was wondering, are they currently being used in any kind of like staff training kind of procedural exercises, or are they? Can they be used for that kind of use? In other words, do they have some kind of legal status which would not allow you to be using them for other purposes?
We could certainly use them for other purposes. I don't know that we would use them for public purposes. They are certainly used for DUIs and things like that in a court proceeding.
Yeah.
Internally, currently, beyond the review to make sure the officers are following procedures, being courteous as opposed to rude. or maybe citizen complaint issues. We found them helpful.
I was just wondering if you had the officers watch themselves in various, instances of stops to talk about effectiveness or appropriate comment that comes after certain discussion with the vehicle owner or something.
Supervisor certainly would have the ability to do that with his officers.
Because we don't have a pretty useful way of self-revelation as far as, a lot of times we don't know quite what we're doing, but we see it in a film, or if it's videotaped, you see yourself in a different way. So I was just wondering if you had thoughts about using those occasionally for
I think occasionally
a review
that's
process for individual new officers or training staff or something.
I think that's a very good idea.
Okay.
Any other questions? Oh, sorry.
That's all.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Tracy Parsons.
Good evening. I'm Tracy Parsons. I'm president of the local Urban League here in town, and I know it's late in the hour for all of you, and it is for me as well, so I'll try to keep my comments as brief as possible. I've had an opportunity to spend a great deal of time on this issue over the last 5 or 6 years, mostly in Champaign. Not as much in Urbana. In fact, Chief Adair and I probably haven't sat down and spoken about this stuff in a couple of years. So I am pleased to see you as a council and the city and the police department discussing this issue. In Champaign, we have formed a community-wide group that I think has been invaluable in really dissecting this issue in a much deeper level than you're going to be able to do here as a council, and much deeper level than what the officers are going to do independently on their own. In my experience, I think police departments across the country, and I'll probably feel comfortable in saying our police department here in Urbana starts from a place of denial about this issue. And so I say that relatively confidently, that that's where we start from. And until you're able to really get in depth with these issues and break them down by issue, not just traffic, because we're looking at traffic as an isolated issue here, which I think is potentially very dangerous for us around this issue. I will commend, and I know in Champaign when we started, they did not have a data collection person as well, and you're doing it with a part-time person, and so I do know the challenges that brings, and budget constraints probably would not allow us to have a full-time person to do data collection. But I do think we need to move into that direction where we have a person that this is what they do. I'm not a data analysis, and I don't know how many of you have expertise in that area. So often when we look at data, we don't know what we're looking at. And I'll say that from a community perspective. We've been working on this stuff again, and you can throw data at us all day long, and a lot of it I don't know how to analyze it. And I say that quite honestly, as we talk about this issue and we look at these reports and charts, what does it all mean? Sometimes I don't know if we know the answers to that. But I would encourage you to look at this issue, not just from this IDOT report, which I think we started collecting data several years ago in Champaign, and traffic stops is just a small part of this. And so what I want us to think about in Urbana as well is effective policing that's non-biased policing. And I will say to you, I was very concerned with some of the comments I've heard tonight, as well as the chief's comments last time, generalizing comments about poor people and black people. And I think we have to be so careful when we start from that perspective, because that feeds into the biases of the officers, it feeds into the biases of the citizens, and it feeds into the biases of those that are the most engaged in this issue. And so we have to be so careful with that. And I'll tell you, I've been very concerned about that as language that started tonight, as well as the last discussion that we had. I think effective policing means hiring, promotion, training within. I think it looks at training from outside forces. You guys have briefly talked about the consultant that we had over in Champaign. This gentleman was outstanding, but he's an ex-officer. And he knew terminology, language that we don't know as citizens, and how to disrupt the behavior of the officers and help them understand those things that they might be doing that are biased, that they don't know or don't believe. And sometimes it is not on purpose. But if we believe into biases that poor people and black people commit more crimes than white folks, then we're buying into that, and we police that way. And I believe that strongly, and I say that strongly. Communication with outside folks is very critical. I don't believe the police can have these discussions internally and effectively solve it. All of us are audited, our organizations are audited, we have outside people that participate and talk with us all the time. I don't see how police can do that only internally. We've talked about accountability of the officers. I think that's critical. Within most departments, there's probably 1 or 2 or 3 rogue officers that are doing most of the violations. And so accountability for how we handle those officers is really critical in this type of work. Engagement with young people, and I could go on, but I'll try to be brief, but engagement with young people is really critical. Most African American young people grow up with perceptions of police and policing that start young and stay with them throughout their entire lives. I've touched on the data analysis, and I've also just touched on the monitoring. I am also a believer that I don't believe police can police themselves. And so whether it's a citizen review board or someone external or some entity that's external to help provide some balance, I really believe is critical to this issue. And so I say this from my years of working in Champaign. I say this from, I've been on the national task force with my national organization. I say this from the countless discussions, conferences, meetings that I've been to around this issue. And so a lot of this is, and I know we're short on time, but a lot of this is perception versus reality. And so we can have the best police officers doing the right thing, doing it the right way, communicating the best way. And if you drive by and you see an officer with 5 cars around 1 car with 1 African American, your perception is that's over-policing. And I don't know how you balance that, but that feeds into that mindset and that perception that some kind of way this is overkill, unnecessary policing. And so we're learning how do you communicate and talk about those things that we're making progress, those areas that you're making progress, because often those things are not what's communicated out, and we heard about measurements and how we do those things. As the speakers mentioned earlier, and I heard Lieutenant Bealey address that as well, how do you communicate your successes? Let me just give you a couple of examples of the kind of things that I get at the Urban League that I don't know how it's measurable. I don't, these are alleged things often, and so let me just give you this. One is an African American who lives in an area in the South was arrested on a domestic issue, and alleged to me that when the officer had him in the car, he said to him, "I can't believe you people are bringing this stuff out here to this neighborhood. We don't have this stuff out here." And so that's alleged stuff. Whether it's factual or whether it happened or not, I wasn't there, we weren't there, we'll have no way of ever being able to prove that. But those are the kind of things that if we have officers that believe only black people and low-income people commit crimes, or they do that disproportionately, or they're only ones that do that, those are why those things concern me. I've talked to many parents that talk about their young people being stopped when they're in the cars 3 and 4, and so I wish we communicated better than we do, but I get those alleged complaints or complaints that are alleged that communication is not happening. When we looked at, and I look at the data, I look at those very subjective areas. I look at the stops, I look at those things, whether it happened, I look at the equipment stuff, because the people that call me talk about, they said I was stopped because my license plate was hanging, or they stopped me because I had something hanging from my tassel. And what I've always asked the Champaign police, what is the barometer of effective policing? So if you stop a car and believe that they're selling drugs or those things in that neighborhood, that person is selling, and you stop 10, and you only find 3, or even if you find 7 that are dirty, you've now ticked off 7, or you've now ticked off 3. What's the barometer of effective policing? Should it be 100%? I don't know if that's reasonable or not, but those are the kind of questions we have to ask ourselves when we look at this issue. My experience says that the police are masters of making sure that their documentation and their language is consistent with what it needs to be. So, for example, they will say in their reports that I stopped this car because of this, and I did this action because of this. And we have to learn how to disrupt that. We have to learn how to make sure that the policies and the procedures that they talk about implementing are actually what they are doing. And so, you know, we heard the chief say at the first meeting that we do profile, but we profile action, not people. And if we buy into those beliefs about poor and black people, it just concerns me on how we can have non-bias-based policing. So I like a number of the recommendations as well, and I could go through those. And I would encourage the council to encourage the police department to get some type of community-based group. I'm not looking for another committee or board to serve on, but I think that's an effective way of really hammering these, effectively and honestly, hammering these issues out directly. So I love a lot of the recommendations as well. So thanks.
Are there any questions for Mr. Parsons? Thank you very much. Okay, there being no further business, this meeting is adjourned.